Right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for making time out of your day to join this really exciting Red and Yellow webinar with Paula Hully. Before we get started, we're going to give some other attendees 1 or 2 more minutes to join. And then I'm going to run through just a few house rules, introduce Paula, and we'll get cracking on today's really, really exciting webinar. All right, I think we are ready to get started on today's webinar, brought to you by Red and Yellow. To begin with, my name is Nick. I'm the head of content here at Red and Yellow, and I'm really, really excited that we get to bring you some incredible insights and lessons from Paula Hully, who I'll introduce to you in a second, as part of our 30 Years and 30 alumni campaign. So Paula is a proud Red and Yellow alumnus, and she'll probably tell you a little bit more about that. But in the meantime, welcome to How Copywriting Can Make You a Creative Leader and Supercharge Your Career. Some house rules before I introduce Paula. If you would like to participate in the Q&A session, which will happen at the end of the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom. You can post your questions throughout the Zoom, and we'll address them at the end of the chat. If you do want to chat amongst yourselves in the chat, please feel free to do so. But for Q&A, you can drop it in the Q&A box at the bottom. All right, so a big welcome to Paula Hully today. Just a little bit of background on who Paula is and what she does. Paula studied copywriting here at Red and Yellow, and she's the current managing director of Digitas Licorice, which is Publicis Group's digital specialist agency. Paula, along with her teams, have won multiple golds at the Lurie Awards, and her more than 2-decade-long career in digital marketing has seen her co-create the IAB Youth Action Council and Front Row program. Paula has also served as the CEO of the IAB South Africa, head of innovation at Ogilvy Cape Town, and managing director of Glue in Cape Town. When she's not heading up the premier interactive advertising agency within Publicis Group, Paula also sits on the IAB South Africa Research and Measurement Council and heads up the IAB SA Online Ad Spend Report. So Paula's been an instrumental part of South Africa's advertising industry, fueled by a passion for building brands and creating consumer engaging experiences. So a big welcome to Paula today. I'm going to hand over to you to tell us a little bit more about how copywriting can make us a creative leader.
Thanks, Nick. And just a big shout out to the whole Red and Yellow team, to Maxine and to Kat. Yeah, it's been such a lovely build up to this day. And thank you for all your help along the way. Yes, 30 years. I think I got into the first year actually at Red and Yellow, which was in 1994. So one of the originals, but I had the opportunity to actually go and study overseas for a year in Las Vegas, just to add to that. So I did copywriting in the States, and then came back to be the class of 1995. So that 30 years probably, stands more for me than a lot of the others, but it's lovely to be here. And yes, I was part of the copywriting team. There were 9 of us, just 9 copywriters and 35 art directors. We didn't have the business part of the school just yet, with Brian Siltrip. So I was one of the 9. But yeah, before I go too far back into the olden days, let's look forward and look at some of the key ways that copywriting really helped me supercharge my career. So if I just get to the next slide, I think for me today, yes, it is about copywriting and leadership, but it's fundamentally about creativity and these magical connections between brands and people. So I had a look online, just what does magic mean? And I think it's particularly important because when I joined Red and Yellow, it was actually called the Red and Yellow School of Logic and Magic at the time. And I now found myself 30 years later at Digitas, where we really speak to these magical connections between brands and people. So I'll speak a little bit about my journey, but just before then, I want to speak to, what does magic mean? And the saying that, or the meaning that related most to me was that magic is related to having special powers to make things happen that would be otherwise impossible. And I think if that is something to remember for my whole career, I think those are the moments that I remember most, is when we were given a brief that felt impossible or a job to be done. And what were those key, principles that we took forward to make the impossible happen? And I think especially at this time, of all these new things that are happening, I mean, it's always been about change. In the last 30 years, we could name a few. But at this point in time, with the onset, or let's not call it the onset, it's here, in terms of AI and what that means for creativity, along with all the platforms and systems and services and data that we have at our disposal, I think really understanding the magic of creativity and what that means is so important. At the same time, I want to say that there is always room for creativity. Our agencies are searching for it, and for you always, especially with copywriting and the fundamental art of how we express ourselves. So yeah, kudos to you if you're on the journey, or if you're already ending your journey, or wherever you're at. I'm so glad to be chatting with you today and look forward to answering your questions or to chat together later. So in terms of my journey, I thought I would just, it is 30 years. I don't think even all of it's on here, but just like some of the key points. Along the bottom, I'm like a weather girl, guys. You'll just get used to it. I like to land the clouds in the sunshine, but along the bottom of the curve, you'll see some of my study highlights. And you'll see in one of the points I make later is that just referring to the diversity of the things I've studied, really starting with copywriting and wanting to be a journalist. I think the opportunity at that time, post going to Red & Yellow before getting a job, because I'd done it as one of the first things I did out of school, was to get a degree, and that would have meant going to Rhodes or to Stellenbosch. And so I chose Stellenbosch. And when I got there, all my friends were doing sports science and psych. So I switched over to do that, which actually turned out really well for me, because I ended up doing my honors in psychology. And I think understanding people for copywriters and for leaders is just so relevant. And as you'll see at the end of all of that, I'm currently, for my sins, doing a master's at the moment through UNISA in social psychology, and actually understanding how collaboration versus competition helps us to win at what we do and how to succeed. So yeah, I think the diversity of what I've learned and the opportunities, I've just been really lucky, and I take them with both hands every moment I get. I like to learn. I like content. Yeah. My mom taught me to read when I was 4, so I was really lucky that she did that. And so, yeah, I can just learn to access so much copy. I can read really fast. And that really helped me along the way. And then in terms of my career, what's really interesting in terms of my experience along these studying is that it didn't always make sense, the choices maybe that I made or that were brought to me and that I took on board. But at the end of it, what you can see is basically the full consumer journey. And so when I ended up at the IAB, when I chose to take on the CEO and the leadership role, it really brought everything together, and the ability to collaborate across brands, publishers, agencies, specialists, etc., was just an amazing culmination of all the learning and all the experience that I had, which I've now taken to Digitas in terms of the connected consumer and shoppable networked experiences. So yeah, it all makes sense. I won't say the end, because this isn't the end, but just to keep learning. And you'll see that I've sort of got 5 chapters today that I wanted to go through with you in terms of how copywriting took me on this journey. So yeah, happy to come back to this slide if anyone wants to ask any questions. So in terms of the contents today, we've just got 5 brief chapters. I wanted to keep it nice and sharp so that we could have time for questions. So we're going to kick off with copywriting, or leadership as an art. So I think we know that for those of you who are copywriters or know copywriters or admire people who can write great copy, there is fundamentally an art behind it. It is a creative expertise, but there's very much a science behind that. There's a craft and a skill that goes behind it, and the great copywriters that I get to work with at Digitas Licorice, or at the Publicis Group, or that I have in my career, really speak to that. And as we know, copywriting these days, there are just so many opportunities, and yeah, in terms of the type of copywriting that you can do. So we'll talk about that in a sec, but yeah, it's definitely an art and a science, and leadership reflects that same philosophy. And there's an art to leadership, and there's definitely a science behind that. So if we look at that, especially from a leadership point of view, or how copywriting and leadership intersect around art and science, is that we absolutely need to learn the fundamentals. There's craft, as I mentioned, different skill, different sets of expertise. And I just want to say that I was very conscious of making any spelling mistakes in a copywriting talk. So I really hope I caught them all, but I'm sure there'll be a copywriter who's looking for them. And if there was tequila, we could have one together. But for now, let me know at the end how many you could find. But in terms of leadership being, and copywriting being an art and a science, from a science point of view, there are absolutely skills to learn the fundamentals with a specialist like Red and Yellow is an absolute privilege. To have had the time, at an institution, if I can even call it that, or at a company that has the kind of teachers or the people that can come and speak to you that have that experience, to grab that with both hands and really make that your foundation. It's not everything, but it is a foundation. And the same for leadership, to surround yourself with learning and leaders that you aspire to be, I think is fundamentally part of the science. And then in terms of the art, I think, was it Shakespeare, I think, who said something like, learn all the rules so you can break them, so you can find your own way, but you do need to learn the rules first. I think both from a copywriting point of view, depending on what type of copy you're studying or that you're succeeding at, the same for leadership, depending on the company, or the type of leader that, the type of company that you're in, or the vertical, if you want to call it, will also determine your art in that space. But it's you, right, at the center of all of that. It's your voice. For those of you who are lucky enough to attend Lurie's, you would have heard from some of the great speakers about how they found their creative voice, and their own way of approaching their art, and that it takes time and you just need to persevere. And the same for leadership. I think you need to find your own way of doing it. We'll talk a little bit about imposter syndrome in a sec, but it is about finding that moment. And when I say art, I think what I really want to stress and get across here is that for me, whether when I was studying copywriting or in the creative field or in leadership, I can definitely feel a click, like there's a knowing when I know that that's the right way. Yes, I might have to go test it. I might have to lobby it. I might have to prototype it. I might have to get opinions, but generally, and I think that's something you need to trust in the art after all the science that you gather. That moment when it clicks for you is really important, both as a copywriter and as a leader. So I actually found this book in terms of the science. I found this book that is from 1993, from when I was in Vegas studying copywriting at UNLV. I love that it says it's tough, it's fun, it's a never-ending challenge. I mean, that describes everything at the moment, right? But just hysterical that I've got this book, and a lot of the principles still apply. If you like ChatGPT, what's copywriting, what are the great principles, whatever it is, some of those principles are still very much intact. And the same for leadership, that intersection of art and science, understanding the landscape, and then really putting your approach and your expertise to that, is vital. So chapter 2, so please remember to put your questions in the chat. I know Nick mentioned that earlier on. We're going to just keep with the flow, make sure I don't go over time. Thanks, Maxine. And then we'll get to your questions, but remember to load them in the chat. So the second one is know your audience. And so it was great. I'm so great that Nick and the team shared a bit about you guys in terms of who I'm speaking to today. And I believe there's just such a cross section of different people, depending on where you are in your career, or if you're just still studying, or if you're a content creator, or you're a marketing manager. It's just really great to know who you are, so that I can hopefully present something meaningful to you. But in terms of knowing your audience, sorry, and this just keeps going over me there. So, from a copywriting and leadership point of view, it's vital for you to know your audience. So you need to know who you are addressing. So, the brief, did it talk about the insights about the target audience? Did your strategist give you what you need in terms of, the information about them and their, what they like, what they don't like, what already exists out there. Who's receiving this content, who might receive it. The same from a leadership point of view. If you're going to go and speak to someone or it's a particular client, you're going to negotiate a contract, everyone is very different, and there are different tools that we can use as leaders to know more about ourselves, but also about the people that we're speaking to. And to gain as many experiences as you can. Like I think, I don't know if it's like being brave or just being a bit silly, but just saying yes to things, I think is so important. And like getting as many experiences as you can. As you could see from my studying, in lockdown, I think we probably all studied some crazy stuff, but like I studied to be a stylist. I had done astrology in my 20s, finance for non-financial managers at Gibbs, alongside the more traditional learning. So get as much experience, do as many red and yellow courses as you can. And if your company has, the bursary option, find out about it, because you want diverse information. As a copywriter, to understand your audiences, you need to understand a huge amount of information. I don't think, a lot of respect to all the copywriters these days, because more so than ever, in terms of the vast amount of information that are available to help kind of pull that into your art. And consult communities, explore their content. We just have so much that we can learn in terms of understanding who we're talking to and what value we can bring them. How can we make their day better? How can we bring some of that magic to their world? And really in that, the diversity of thinking is key across both. If you're going to be a leader that just looks at, well, this is how I do things and this is how my boss did things, it's a really hard job. Then you do need to consult and manage and understand the diversity around you. So in terms of knowing your audience, what's so interesting for copywriting and how we've moved from lifestyle, 13 to 50-year-old women who like cars, I suppose, in the olden days, to, really looking at identifying like behavioral growth cohorts that drive growth. Like if your brief can help you understand exactly who you're talking to, what are your objectives that you're trying to reach? It used to be quite like performance-based, but now how do we bring qualitative statistics to our kind of audience understanding? These linear funnels are gone. As Digitas, we say the funnel has collapsed. People are, discovering content and buying all at once. Copy used to be like, oh, well, do we want them to like explore this and then another piece of copy for when they buy it? That'll be like call to action. And while you always need a call to action, we need to understand that people might be looking at something on Instagram and they want to buy it in that moment. And how do you take them on that journey? So I think for copywriters, obviously this is a fundamental piece. I feel like I'm lecturing to the people who know everything already. And then from leadership as well, when you are talking to your clients or you want to probably have influence over a particular decision as a leader or to create impact, I think as a leader, that's something that should excite you, that you want to be around the table, that you want to influence that moment. If you're talking to an innovator or you're talking to someone who's very conservative, you need to change your approach. And sort of, lucky enough to do some training at Publicis called Shift that really kind of locked this in for me, and kind of all the kind of customer journeys that happen off of that. The science, I guess, again. And in the same space, from a copywriting point of view, and there are so many different types of copywriters, right? And you might tick a couple of the boxes. So you can be a conceptual copywriter, an SEO copywriter, a performance marketing copywriter. There's just so many different ways of obviously expressing your talents and collecting them, I suppose, along your career journey. There are just so many platforms where you can gather information about your audience and about what they're doing and about the products. At Publicis, again, we're just super lucky to have access to that. I know Red and Yellow does as well. In terms of that understanding. And then, what we've taken on board recently at Publicis and at Digitas is what's called the Enneagram. And this isn't to put anyone in a box. And previously at Ogilvy and at Glue, we use something called Insights. But it's really understanding, I'm a active social too. So you can kind of look that up online and you can quickly learn a lot about me. So like, if you want to engage with me after this webinar and ask for my time, or I don't know, or maybe we can do a project together. yeah, you can learn quickly how to talk to me in a way that makes me say yes. So yeah, these are all great tools that we can use as copywriters and as leaders. But yeah, tools to enable the science, I think, is vital. And yeah, really understanding audiences. These are all the dashboards, etc. So chapter 3, the architecture of information. So I think when I first started to put this one down, for me, it was really about the fact that I consume a lot of content. I love it. I love to, if I can't be reading, if I'm not online, if I'm not looking at the TV or the internet or the apps or whatever it might be, books, I like to consume a lot of information. I have my whole life. And I think that that really helps with with both, I suppose, from a copywriting point of view and a leadership point of view, because, yes, it's wonderful to have access to all this information, but what do you do with all of this data? If you're someone who can just take on board a lot of information, or you've got teams that do that for you, it needs to go into a system so that you can make sense of it and then make decisions off of it. So especially when you're working with big teams. So I believe that copywriting and leadership both relish design thinking and system design. And for me, what that means is, just in one sentence, because we could probably spend a whole chapter talking about it, and I think you guys have got courses on it, both require an articulation of the problem that we brought in to solve. So as a copywriter, if you're looking at your brief, or you're chatting to the client, the brief might say one thing, but what you're trying to understand is, what are you trying to solve for? And has that problem been clearly articulated? We so quickly, and I'm, as an active social too, love to just jump straight in without stepping back and asking that question, and then really articulating the problem in a way that helps us to kind of solve for it, that can bring meaningful results to the business. And actually working with you, Nick, on even just this, the title for the webinar and everything really helped to frame what we were going to talk about. So yeah, I think that's why I said thank you earlier, because it really helped to develop the flow for this talk. And I would say that as a copywriter or a creative, or a leader, if you're not passionate about solving problems, run for the hills. Because as a leader, well, let me tell you a story. My uncle was an emergency surgeon. Yeah, when you're in the emergency ward, and he was the guy, like the last resort, like he would operate on people. And a friend of mine asked him a question. She said, she's a doctor, and she said, my uncle's Paul, I'm Paula. It's like in the family, my dad's Paul. What can we do? So she asked my uncle, my gosh, sick people keep coming to me all the time. And like, when do I get a break? And he was like, well, then maybe you don't want to be a doctor, because, if you're a doctor, sick people will come to you. So I think as a leader or as a copywriter, you're constantly going to get, I always liken it to, like, a problem is basically everything is scrunched up in a bunch. And as a copywriter who has to really create a system for that information with a strategist, and the team, and as a leader, you need to pull that information apart and have the energy and the time, calmness. I wasn't very calm in my meeting earlier, I will admit, so shout out to the team. But yeah, you need to have a passion for solving problems, because as a leader, that's all you're going to really get. And if you're excited about that, and you're excited to use your experience and some of these sort of the science and the art, and that you understand your audience, by the time you get to the problem, you should be like, this is how we're going to build our business. This is the answer that we want to look for. This is the thing that's going to really change the game. And you need to be able to put an architecture or system around that so others can participate. I think early on in my career, and often I still fall victim to it, I like to run and do it really quickly, and then no one can come along the ride with you. So yeah, you want to enable others to come with you. And to do that, you need a system that other people can understand, and so that you can all go on the journey together. And I just included some of the key pieces, like, if you want to have quality conversations, you need a system to work in. I can give a few examples, taxonomy, the art of taxonomy, especially in the digital space, digital customer experience, business transformation. And with AI, a lot of businesses think they might be able to, supersede business, we haven't really got all our data all in one place. It's not clean. AI can help us fix that, but you have to transform your business to make sure your data and all your information is ready before you can run AI through that. So yeah, I think the architecture of information, for many reasons, applies, a lot to this talk today. And so this slide I stole from Ogilvy. I think David Ogilvy said steal with pride. I think it's on the internet, so I know I'm not in breach. So, and it's a bit weird that it's under copywriting because it's actually a strategic slide, but I think for copywriters, it's a really great slide. You know, platform, program, and pulse, I usually speak to, you know, the grandparent, the parent, and the child. It's how information lives. It's how we present information. It's a lovely strategic tool. You know, and as copywriters, when you're giving a message, when you're creating messages, when you're working with strategists, you really want to understand, you know, is this for right now? Is this like a quick thing that's going to disappear? Do I need this message, you know, in terms of, you know, if it's Unilever beauty on the inside, or Dove beauty on the inside, you know, that is a, you know, mattering for years line versus, you know, buy now 35% off. Well, that might, in some cases for Amazon, that is their like, their big line, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, I think having this architecture is really important, whatever you choose to use, and the same for leadership. You know, you need to understand how information moves through a system, even in a conversation. So if you're negotiating a deal or a contract, you know, you need to understand how that information flows and that you follow each of those steps. Again, art and science, you can maybe break one of the rules, but you need to know them first. So definitely have a system that you work in, that you choose and prefer as a leader. So yeah, those are just some of the ideas I wanted to put forward in the session, sort of top line. Chapter 4, there are only 5, so almost at the end. Cooperative communities. As I mentioned, I'm studying my master's in cooperation. I think there are about, well, there are obviously more than 2,000 papers, but in social psychology, there are about 2,000 papers on the subject. It's actually quite a hard thing to define, cooperation. It means different things. And my focus is really on game theory and really proving that if you cooperate long-term, you will win, versus if you compete for a short-term gain, you'll ultimately, and your community will ultimately lose later. So this is a big thing that we're looking at the moment. But I just wanted to tell you where my headspace was at. So yeah, I really believe that copywriting and leadership are enabled by cooperative communities. I think at the moment we see a lot about, you know, obviously social media and these one-to-one relationships at scale, niche audiences, speaking carefully and with deliberation and with care to our communities, to eliciting a rapport that can be an engagement over time. You don't want to just drop something in there and be like, you know, I need you now and not forever. It's no longer possible. You need to have a sustainable relationship with your communities. So if I look at copywriting specifically, like, you're not an island as a copywriter. I know sometimes we need to go away into a room and write with not being bothered, so then be an island. But to ensure your copy wins, you know, you've obviously collaborated with your strategists, with your creative directors. You may even be a copywriting creative director, or your partner, or other copywriters or developers or your data scientists. You know, it's key that you're working together and understanding the brief and how your messaging is going to turn up in what channel, on what platform. What happens next? Is the messaging consistent across the full consumer journey? You might also collaborate with your fellow copywriters in the different specialties, you know, in terms of SEO copy, web, social. Anyway, yeah, you can read it. I won't read the whole thing. But yeah, there's just so many opportunities in copywriting, but also we need to work together to make sure that the customer, you know, really feels that impact that the brand wants and that you want as a creative leader. And the same for leadership. So understanding your communities around you. And I learned this, you know, a lot at Ogilvy and a lot at the IAB. Yes, you need to make decisions as a leader. The buck stops with you. Consulting your fellow leadership team or your board or your fellow colleagues is vital in order to make sure that you collect information, as I mentioned earlier, so that what you're saying is considered and thoughtful and is full of care, and that it's going to achieve the results that you want. If you're doing that on your own as an island, you're going to get a short-term win. And I can promise you in the next meeting you go into, that project's going to get cancelled. You know, especially in digital with business transformation and digital transformation, you know, you go in, you speak to the marketing team, you want to get that project through. If procurement, if the CEO, if their, you know, their sales team, if their teams aren't sitting around that table, you can't transform a business. As much as the marketing CMO is saying, let's go, it's absolutely impossible without those people there. And as an agency lead, to help them to make that decision and to help get those people in the room. I think marketers are particularly under a lot of strain at the moment. Their job has just grown so massively in the last 10 years and continues to exponentially grow, as we move forward. So the more we can help them to articulate the problem correctly, to bring the right communities together, to systematize and create a framework for that to work in, I think, the more we can help ourselves and the communities that we're literally in service of, in my mind. I think collaborating with communities is key. My speech is over now, but something I'm obviously very passionate about. So, in your cooperative copywriting communities, you're obviously working with, Digitas, we call them networked experiences, but you're working with, all the various people around you to make sure that your messaging is clear and makes sense. In leadership, what used to be, this is a very old-fashioned diagram. It looks quite hierarchical, but I think something probably more relevant is this one, but from the IAB in pink under copywriting, I think on the left, because yes, we have hierarchies. They're important for the way information travels and how we make decisions and how budgets are approved. But if we actually look at how things are stacking, it gets slightly different. So for copywriting here, and this slide, I can share a link with you, Nick. You can share it with everyone. There's a beautiful document about brand disruption and how, I guess the flow of information has changed so radically between a client and the agency and the customer, as well as how, I guess, copywriting then would move across all of that in the last 10 years. It's a fantastic document. But there's so many communities that we need to take into consideration. So under brand, you'll see there are 4 stacks here. So the attention stack is typically where agencies traditionally fall in. And so you'd be writing copy for display banners, for web, for brochures, for B2B, whatever that might be. But then that package gets delivered to the person, through a courier, and they receive it. What's the message? Is there a message that they're opening in the box? What about that product? If the customer wants to give information back that they didn't like the product, how can we bring that back into the creative matrix? And what would that copy look like in a social community if we wanted to ask their opinion? So it's a very integrated ecosystem at the moment, and something for copywriters to really keep in mind. It's taxing, and maybe you probably already know this. So I know it can be taxing, but it's just a beautiful way to just pull communities together and to work cooperatively. And then under leadership, I just wanted to include a quote that I got out of one of my training sessions recently. In a cooperative community space and as a leader, I'm actually going to read it out. I know you can all read, but I think pretend that every single person you meet has a sign around his, her, or other neck that says, "Make me feel important." That doesn't mean you have to blow smoke or be coquettish or whatever that might be. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, take the time to listen to people, take the time to understand and to listen and notice people. I think that just goes a long way as a copywriter or as a leader to making sure that we can move forward together. And I think that's what we want, right? We don't want to go backwards, maybe to 1982. Maybe that, I don't know, was that easier? I don't know. Last chapter. Typically, it's all in the mind. And I just wanted to close off with that. I wear my heart on my sleeve. As I said, I'm an Enneagram 2, not much. You can't say much to me without it turning all up on my face. Like I can't really keep I can keep a secret, but if you tell me something and I've got a reaction, you're going to see it on my face. So I think heart's just really important to me. And what I mean by that is, copywriting and leadership. So the art and the science of copywriting and leadership really thrive on us being bold, open, and curious. These are our Digitas global values. We call ourselves unicorns. There are 5,500 of us around the world. And we really try and hold these 3 really close to our hearts. I think, there's a lot of discussion at the moment around imposter syndrome. It's not a new subject, but I think people are speaking about it a lot more. Low self-esteem and what that means to any of us. And I suppose on any given day, it can go up or down. But as a creative or a creative leader, these things are common. And we need to be able to acknowledge that to grow. You can do courses, you can meet with your friends, join communities, to find out what that means for other people, and that it's not something that's just happening to you. Creativity is such a careful, precious thing that when we're working with it, even as a leader, it's hard to put it out. And I know we know this, but every time it's hard. For myself, I think my husband, Alex, he works at Puma. He knows when I've got a creative delivery the next day. And I know it's not copywriting. I'm not a copywriter at the moment. But as a leader, if I'm producing something, I get into an incredibly foul mood. I get very anxious. And I've realized I'm literally going into that creative, like low self-esteem moment where I know I'm going to get judged for the thing that I'm sharing. And yeah, I'm 48 years old and that still happens to me. So I've certainly become more confident, but it is something to acknowledge. And whether you're a creative or a leader or both, yeah, I think that's something that we all, working on. But the thing that really is important to make sure that we are working with it is that so that we can say yes to things. So when someone says to you, oh, there's a talk tomorrow and it's at 8:00, or there's this piece we need to get out tonight for radio or whatever it is, and we're like, oh no, that's really hard. I don't think I'm the one. Say yes. Ask some more questions, get some help, but say yes. Be bold, be open, be curious. That's the way we collect opportunities, that we can have diversity of thinking, so that we can meet new people, so that we can access new communities, so that we can learn, and so that we can, Nick, what's the title of my talk? So we can have progress in our career. That's you got to say yes. If you're saying no and you're wondering why maybe the next thing hasn't found you, it's probably because you said no to it and it just didn't turn up the way you thought it might. So yeah, I think saying yes to opportunities that supercharge your career, that's the line, to help others and to help others do the same. Give other people opportunities too. They also need a moment to shine. And I think in that is learning to listen to your gut instinct. That's of all the science and all your experience, you're going to hear in the calmness of it, that that's the direction. And even if you don't get your way and someone else is going to go their way, acknowledge when it turns out, if it turned out the way you thought it would, acknowledge that for yourself, so that you know that you can listen to your instinct. I think that's super important. And that feeling, I suppose, I associate it, I suppose people say gut instinct or in a heart, like you can feel in your body, like when that moment is that it clicks and that, that's the way. This is a great piece of copywriting. This is right for this audience. This is right for this community. So yeah, really learn how to feel that and to reward that for yourself when it does come about. And that will really help you to make those decisions that enable your growth, both personally and professionally. And I think within that, we know mental health and well-being is everything. I think December is just such a crazy month. I'm referring to December as one big Friday. That feeling where you're getting to the end of the week, and even though it's still tough and there's still Monday coming, Friday just feels better. So December is just one big Friday. I know it's only the 4th. I'm only going on leave on the 20th. So there's still a lot to do. But yeah, let's just make sure that we take our breaks as a leader or as an artist, nurture yourself, whatever it is. For me, I like to, I'm just looking around the room, like what's around me. It's just like lots of magazines, lots of content, my coffee, my unicorn things that I get from my team. What is it that's going to help you energize and nurture yourself into the end of the year and for a lekker break, hopefully soon. So yeah. Oh, sorry, one more slide. I think I just wanted to, end off in terms of the word trust. As a copywriter and a leader, you want to garner trust from the people that you work with and trust in yourself. I think that's the gut instinct thing that I was talking about. You really want to be able to trust that instinct that you have and to acknowledge it when you feel that. So you want credibility. My boss, John T, he's the VP of Communications at Publicis, super knowledgeable, very strategic. He speaks a lot about credibility. And, that means you know your stuff, and it means you do what you say you're going to do. And as, whether you're an artist, a copywriter, a leader, or both, that's important. And that comes into reliability. And then the intimacy, I suppose, people talk a lot about psychological safety. in a creative environment, we do need that. And you need to be able to feel safe. So I think that's all part of, do I trust someone or not? And then the self-orientation, and I suppose I'm sneaking in a bit of my master stuff here, but, are you focused only on your interests or also on mine? And I think in this day and age, you do need to look after yourself, and you need to, that whole thing about being on an airplane and putting on the mask first before you put on your child's mask or someone else's. Yes, you need to look after yourself. But if your agenda is fully focused on only your outcome, there's no long game there for you. And this is about the long haul. This is about progress in your career, shining and helping, others to shine along the way. So yeah, try and be other orientated when you can without being of disservice to yourself, and to develop trust, I think, as a copywriter or a leader is ultimately what it all boils down to. So that is actually my last slide. Yes. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Maxine.
Fantastic. Paula, thank you so much. That's really, really incredible in-depth insights there. I hope everyone found a lot of value in that. The Q&A is open now, so if you haven't got your question in, you can type it in now. Paula, I'm going to start off by asking you a question that relates to the first point that you raised. I think as copywriters, because I work in copy, words are my first love. It's always going to be that way. Also a big reader growing up, still a big reader. I think one of the things with the copywriting process is that you do get the opportunity to be sent a brief, interrogate the brief, understand the problem that's trying to be solved, understand the audience, getting the whole picture of what we're trying to do in this particular project. I think it's quite a special place to be when you're either working in a team. There might be other people in a team who aren't copywriters who might not get the opportunity to delve that deep. How similar is this process before actually reaching the final product? How similar is this process to what like a leader would do in a business?
It's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, well, I use the Enneagram language, but I work quite quickly. I talk quite quickly. And so I would say that as a leader, earlier on in my leadership, I would have bypassed some of those processes because, you're under fire, like there's a question, you've got to go. I've been lucky enough to work with such a strong leadership team this year. And one of my favorite things is how they've taught me that you can absolutely follow that process, even if you're under high fire. So Namika is our GM at Digitas. And, what I'm always amazed at is she will find a way without, to ask another question, to get that clarity. Let's make sure we're solving the right problem. Let's just take one step back. We don't have to take more than 5 minutes. We're still going to solve this quickly, but we just need to be able to have the information we need to solve the problem. And ultimately, the solution is always so much stronger at the end of it. So I actually love that process is very similar. It might happen a bit quicker, and potentially less documented sometimes, but you will have to post document, to be clear. But I actually think the process is really similar. I mean, I'd love to hear from anyone on the call, like who has a different view. But I do think those steps are really critical, even if it's happening really fast. Don't let someone sweep you off your feet and make you make a decision that isn't considered. And I've learned there's always time to ask a question and get the brief that you need. Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
I feel like it's, it does come down to problem solving. Like what problem are you trying to solve for? And I find it interesting that a lot of people think copywriting is just about writing paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of engaging kind of copy. But as you mentioned, there are so many different types of copywriters. I think of an example. I've got a friend who's a copywriter working for a company, and she had to write a Google banner, and she had 3 words. She had the space for 3 words to try and get the message across. So again, that kind of creative problem solving, I feel, is something that leadership has to do. Copywriters also have to do. We've got a question here from Farhan, who's asking, regarding our copywriting, if we are posting on social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram, should our copy length be limited to 1 line or 2 lines, or can we post 3 lines maximum, which is concise?
That's a great question. I think a sign of good leadership is also knowing when you don't know all the answers. So I'm just going to put my hand up, and I wish Kakisha, our head of social, was here with me. I also think, besides the rules that obviously the platform set up in terms of best behavior, because they've got so much data that tells you what works best, not only what works best in general, but per vertical. So if it's a car brand versus sweets versus tourism, there might be a different answer, and depending on the ultimate KPI or goal that you're trying to achieve. So I think that data, the platforms can give you. And then also in terms of the brand language. So if you're a conversational brand, and you're in a community that's quite well established, you might want to take more time in your copy. So yeah, I think, so one, I'm saying I don't have the exact answer, and two, I'm just expanding on how I understand brand and messaging to work. So Farhan, happy to reach out to my team and get that actual answer for you, but yeah, that'd be my answer.
We've got another question here from Andrea, who's asking, what are your top 5 books that you would recommend?
Excellent. Okay, I won't tell you what I'm reading at the moment. 5 books that I would recommend. Oh my word. I really love, so Vivienne Westwood. She recently passed away. She's a designer. She wrote a book. It's got an orange, I guess I can't remember the names of the books. It's got an orange, I wish I could take photos. Can I do that? When I share the deck with you, can I include the book covers of the books that are my favorite? Because I'm probably not going to remember their names. But yeah, she's an advocate for climate change, and but is a creative, and just how she intersects those two things in a way that is true to her is just beautiful. And I really love that book. I'm reading The Seven Sisters at the moment by Lucinda Chambers, which really just calms my mind. I think they're about 700 pages each, and I think I've read 7 of the 8 of them in the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks, because it's just like going to sleep, making sure I'm calming down. I really like that. Then our ECD, and Nicole Zorn from Digitas gave me the most amazing book. Again, I can't remember the name. It's a red book about leadership. It's fantastic. It's actually about these big brands that took wild risks. And it was about that CEO and how they made those decisions. And it wasn't the common choice at the time, but how those brands succeeded, which is a really amazing book. A book that you mustn't read is this book about, I think it's called How to Make Decisions. And it's 900 pages. And I'm like, I don't want to read 900 pages. I want to make a decision. I want to read a very short book about that. I'm just looking around me. What have I got here? Is Vogue a book? Just kidding. But I will share my top 5 books with, The Alchemist is a favorite. And then I think it's the 16, is it the 16 chapters from, it's a blue book with a gold head. Oh my goodness, my memory at this time of year. And he's like a famous philosopher. Anyway, you'll see them and you'll remember, oh, the blue book, that's the one she spoke about. But yeah, I think I've done 5, even though I didn't give any of the names.
I think that's a great segue into that's a great segue into the next question from Loisu, who's asking, you have a myriad of interests. How has this served you in your work?
Amazing. Thank you, Loisu. I think while on the surface, some of those interests look disparate, actually, I could probably put them into 2 bunches. The one is to understand people, and the other is creativity. I know there's that course in there for financial managers, and I had to do that one. But yeah, it's typically about creativity and then people. So like the astrology or understanding human design or psychology, even stylist course was like understanding people in fashion, and I just love fashion. And yeah, I think understanding how people think and their choices that they make, and even how deciding to how I decide to do a career move is very much about the people in front of me and the creative opportunity and the problem to solve. So I think I wrote, Nick, in the quote for Red and Yellow, I think I wrote something like follow the energy. And so I get an absolute clear feeling. I call it that click. I got that from one of my business coaches, Lynn Christopher. She's amazing. Happy to share her number. She spoke, she spoke about this click, and the energy I can feel when I'm going to make a choice, if it's the right choice to make. I might not know why or have all the answers, but the answers become clear pretty shortly afterwards. So yeah, maybe that's something yeah, you can also look at trying.
The quote that you actually said was, always follow the energy. If it feels exciting, interesting, scary, or energized, then lean in and say yes. Your contribution counts.
Thanks, Nick. That's the one.
Your words, not mine.
Thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
seems like that's it for the questions in the chat. So I'm going to move on and say a really, really, really big thank you to Paula for making time to present today and to share not only her thoughts about, you know, the similarities between copywriting and leadership, but also so much into your life and who you are as a person and as a professional. So a big thank you to Paula, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on this call and this webinar as part of our 30 Years and 30 Alumni feature. And as we've mentioned earlier, you will all be receiving this recording in a follow-up email, as well as some additional resources which Paula will
And
supply,
5 books.
including books with all the different colored covers. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the new year for more webinars with Red and Yellow. And I hope you have an excellent week further.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Maxine. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Kat. Bye.
Bye.